Let's talk about logical fallacies. Understanding logical fallacies is important when it comes to writing and speaking argumentatively. One, because you need to avoid such fallacies in your own writing, and you need to be able to call them out in counter arguments. Let's begin. So, what is a fallacy? A logical fallacy is an error in reasoning in an argument. It can include incorrect reasoning, meaning the conclusion does not logically follow from the premise, even if the premises are true. There could be faulty evidence, meaning the argument relies on false or irrelevant evidence, such as emotional appeals or distorted information. They can be persuasive, but flawed. They are often used intentionally to manipulate or deceive, though they can also be the result of not knowing or thinking through an argument carefully. An argument with a fallacy is said to be fallacious. So, how many logical fallacies are there? Well, the truth is, there's no single definitive number, as the total can be hundreds depending on how they're categorized. The concept was first systematically studied by Aristotle, who identified 13, but modern lists often include dozens, even hundreds, which are generally divided into formal, which are errors in logical structure, and informal, which are errors in content or reasoning. So, for this lesson, we're going to focus on the 10 most common modern logical fallacies. I chose 10 fallacies from this week's reading, and the reason I chose these 10 is because they are the most widely recognized, the most tested, the most common in political and media arguments, the easiest for students to apply in writing, and the ones that students already accidentally use in their writings. These are ad hominem, anecdotal evidence, appeal to authority, appeal to emotion, appeal to popularity, hasty generalization, false analogy, false dilemma, red herring, and slippery slope. Ad hominem. This is an attack on the character of a person rather than his or her opinions or arguments. For example, Greenpeace's strategies aren't effective because they are all dirty, lazy hippies. In this example, the author doesn't even name particular strategies Greenpeace has suggested, much less evaluate those strategies on their merits. Instead, the author attacks the characters of the individuals of the group. Anecdotal evidence. This fallacy uses personal stories instead of actual data as evidence. For example, my uncle smoked and lived to 90, so smoking is safe. This person assumes that what's true for their uncle is true for everyone who smokes. Or they would have the person they're arguing against believe that what's true for their uncle is true for everyone because it makes their argument look better. The fact of the matter is, their uncle is the exception and not the rule. I do want to say this about anecdotal evidence, though. It can be used in an essay, but it is generally considered weak on its own and should be used to supplement evidence rather than stand in for evidence. Anecdotes can be effective for creating relatable openings, illustrating your points with emotion, or providing content, but they should not be the sole support for a claim. Appeal to authority. This fallacy occurs when a claim is accepted as true simply because an authority figure says it is. This is regardless of the actual evidence. This becomes a fallacy when the person cited is not an expert in the relevant field and or is not in agreement with the expert consensus or is biased. For example, oftentimes toothpaste ads use this anonymous authority saying that 9 out of 10 dentists prefer this brand, but they provide no evidence or details about who these dentists are or how they were surveyed. Appeal to emotion. This is a fallacy that uses feelings instead of facts to persuade. Feelings like fear, sympathy, or outrage, or even loyalty or hope. For example, a leader argues for a war by evoking strong patriotic feelings instead of providing strategic or logical reasons for the conflict. While emotions can be a part of an argument, this fallacy occurs when feelings are used in place of facts and logic to make a claim true. Ad populum, also known as the bandwagon appeal. This is an appeal that presents what most people or a group of people think in order to persuade one to think the same way. Getting on the bandwagon is one such instance of an ad populum appeal. For example, if you were a true American, you would support the rights of all people to choose whatever vehicle they want. In this example, the author equates being a true American to a concept that people want to be associated with, particularly in a time of war, with allowing people to buy any vehicle they want, even though there is no inherent connection between the two. Hasty generalization. This is a conclusion based on insufficient or biased evidence. In other words, you are rushing to a conclusion before you have all the relevant facts. For example, even though it's only the first day, I can tell this is going to be a boring course. In this example, the author is basing his evaluation of the entire course on only the first day. To make a fair and reasonable evaluation, the author must attend not one but several classes and possibly even examine the textbook, talk to the professor, or talk to others who have previously finished the course in order to have sufficient evidence to base a conclusion on. False analogy or false equivalence. This type of fallacy draws incorrect comparisons between things that are not similar enough, just as incorrectly assuming that because two things share one or two similarities, they must be similar in other ways too, or incorrectly suggesting that two things are morally or logically equal when they have different levels of significance, validity, or importance. For example, you wouldn't text and drive, so you shouldn't text in class. Both are a distraction, both are dangerous. Pretty sure you've heard this before in school. The argument exaggerates the similarity, quote, both are dangerous, when the level of danger is nowhere near equivalent. This is a false analogy because the argument compares texting in class, a minor distraction, to texting and driving, which can kill people. Even though both involve distraction, the consequences are completely different. either or. This conclusion oversimplifies the argument by reducing it to only two sides or choices. For example, we can either stop using cars or destroy the earth. In this example, the two choices are presented as the only options, yet the author ignores a range of choices in between, such as developing cleaner technology, car sharing systems for necessities and emergencies, or better community planning to discourage daily driving. Red herring. This is a diversionary tactic that avoids the key issues, often by avoiding opposing arguments rather than addressing them. For example, the level of mercury in seafood may be unsafe, but what will fishers do to support their families? In this example, the author switches the discussion away from the safety of the food and talks instead about an economic issue, the livelihood of those catching the fish. While one issue may affect the other, it does not mean we should ignore the possible safety issues because of possible economic consequences to a few individuals. Slippery slope. This is a conclusion based on the premise that if A happens, then eventually through a series of small steps, B, C through XYZ will happen too, basically equating A and Z. So if we don't want Z to occur, A must not be allowed to occur either. For example, if we ban Hummers because they are bad for the environment, eventually the government will ban all cars, so we should not ban Hummers. In this example, the author is equating banning Hummers with banning all cars, which is not the same thing. Let's take a look at this week's reading. This week's reading is called Logical Fallacies, How They Undermine Critical Thinking and How to Avoid Them. The key points are as follows: that logical fallacies are mistakes in reasoning that weaken arguments. They show up everywhere: news, social media, and daily conversations. Knowing them helps us spot bias and build stronger arguments. Common types include ad hominem, straw man, appeal to authority, false dilemma. And to avoid fallacies, we must think before reacting emotionally. Ask, is this actually true? Is it relevant? And stay open to multiple perspectives. The takeaway is that strong thinkers use logic, not emotion, to build credible arguments. Let's meet the authors: Dr. Hershey H. Friedman and Dr. Leon Kagnovsky. Dr. Friedman is a professor of business at Brooklyn College, City University of New York. He's an expert in ethics, leadership, and critical thinking in management. He has published widely on business ethics, social responsibility, and moral reasoning. He is passionate about helping students and professionals make sound, logical decisions. He believes strong thinking skills are essential for ethical leadership. Dr. Kagnovsky is an associate professor of mathematics at Touro College, focuses on logic, problem solving, and quantitative reasoning. He collaborates across disciplines to promote clear, evidence-based thinking. He's the co-author of multiple papers integrating logic, math, and communication skills. He emphasizes that understanding fallacies improves reasoning in every field. Thank you. I really hope that this helps you when it comes to writing your argumentative essays and when it comes to building refutations against counter arguments. Let me know if you need help. As always, I'm here for you. Have a good one. See you soon.